Hello and welcome to another afcbTV preview show. It's already shaping up to be a very busy December, and both myself and matchday commentator Kris Temple will be going through everything that's gone on in the last week. Here's what's coming up. We'll be looking back at that 4-0 defeat to Liverpool here at Vitality Stadium. We'll also be looking ahead to tomorrow's game against Wolves at Molineux. And finally, we'll be previewing next week's Carabao Cup game at Chelsea. But first, we're going to start back at last week, the 4-0 defeat to Liverpool. Kris, it was a tough afternoon, wasn't it?
It was a tough afternoon. We've spoken a few times about how good the Cherries have been in this season in not making individual mistakes, and unfortunately there were a couple in there, which doesn't help against a team like Liverpool who will make you pay. As I've said on this programme many times, I've been sick of talking about referees. It was the linesman this time who did them with the first goal, of course, and it was strange of Eddie or not strange, but it was unusual of Eddie to sort of call the officials out after the game. But I think he was frustrated because he saw it as a clear mistake. But don't get me started on referees, because I could go on for half an hour about it, so I'll leave it there. But yeah, all in all, I mean, poor Steve Cook had a difficult afternoon. I think Asmir will probably feel he could have done better with the first goal that was offside as well. And it just, a little flurry towards the end of the first half. But all in all, difficult day. But context, Liverpool went top of the league with that, stayed top of the league. So therefore, again, the context is there are a lot of teams that are going to get done by Liverpool this season. And
you've just got to look at the players they have. I mean, we saw Salah score a hat-trick. His third goal was quite something.
Yeah, that was a Salah who apparently hasn't been in good form this season. And, you look at that, he was pretty much untouchable in that game. So, yeah, it was just, I think, that it's the individual mistakes that are frustrating in that, because you need to give yourself the best chance against those teams. You need everything to happen right for you, and you need them to have a bit of an off day. And unfortunately, it was the other way around. Bournemouth had a bit of an off day. But it's one result out of 38. And in the context of recent matches, there's been a lot of tough games. They've got to look at the ones coming up now.
And if there's any positives to take, it's just, like you say, another one out the way, another tough one out the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of the tough teams have been here now. United have been here, Arsenal have been here, Liverpool have been here. Of course, still got to go up there, which is a bit of a problem. But we said that how important the Huddersfield win was going to be in this context of this little run, and I think it heaps the Liverpool, not so much the result, the scoreline. It could have been 1-0. It was 4-0. In terms of, it didn't really matter how many they lost by, but it does put the pressure on these next couple of games now, because with Tottenham and Man United looming after Christmas, back into the big guns again. I think, like Newcastle, and Eddie was happy to say that Newcastle was a significant game, Huddersfield was a significant game. I think that these next two look pretty significant as well.
And obviously last week it's the first time that the Cherries haven't scored since Southampton here at Vitality Stadium. How much did they miss Callum Wilson?
I think they did, yeah. I think you've got to miss a man who's in that sort of form, not just his goals, and we've talked a lot about his assists that he's given this season as well, but he's just different to everybody else. Yes, physically he's big and strong like Joshua King, he's quick like Joshua King. Joshua King is not as accomplished a number 9 as Callum Wilson. I'm sure he would probably admit that himself, because he hasn't played there as much. He likes to see himself as a 9, I think, Joshua King. I think that's where he's the biggest goal threat, and when he played as a 9 when Callum Wilson was injured before, that's where he had that little purple patch of goals. But when you take someone like Callum out of the team, his work rate and everything else he gives you, and also the fact that Joshua King and him have been linking up very well. So not only are you taking Callum's ability out, you're taking that partnership out of the situation as well. The wee man, David Brooks, they all had a little drop into the number 10 role. So fingers crossed Callum will be okay for this weekend. I did have a little chat with Callum after the game last weekend, actually, as he was leaving the ground, and he said, he was very touch and go for last week. He probably could have played, but they didn't want to risk it. So it was a fine margin. But I think with the schedule coming up, and a pinged hamstring is 6 weeks, and obviously he has a bit of a history of injuries in other areas. So from that point of view, I think it was a sensible risk not to risk him. And
we saw that Sermon-Lerma partnership in the middle for the first time in a while. What did you make of it?
It's a difficult one, because on paper, the last 2 games they've played, they've lost 4-0 in both of them, away at Burnley and here against Liverpool. It's a partnership, obviously, that we haven't seen that much of. Jefferson-Lerma, it's been Lerma plus Lewis Cook or Gosling. Not so often Sermon, maybe for a few minutes at the end of games, but not for a long time. It's a difficult one, because for me they're not similar players, but there's a bit more, I guess you get a little bit more dynamism out of someone like Dan Gosling in terms of getting around the pitch. Jefferson-Lerma, we know he gets up and down, he's all over the pitch. Andrew Sermon gets described as being a metronome in terms of he's a consistent performer. He doesn't take too many risks. But, you know, let's not forget he hadn't hardly had that many minutes of football recently. So from that point of view, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and a bit of time to settle back into the team. He'll have to play because we've heard this morning that Dan Gosling is going to be out until early January, having had a minor knee operation as well. So you'll be needing your boots soon, because if you can play centre mid, you might be in. You know, they're not in the 25. But yeah, their central midfield locker is looking a bit thin. So it's going to be Lerma and Sermon, unless Eddie starts to get creative with the formation. And as we heard him say previously, people like David Brooks or Junior Stanislas, or even Nathan Ake, although I still can't see that one at the moment.
And on the subject of central midfielders, Nnamdi Offo, the youngster, signed a new contract earlier this week. That's really positive, isn't it? They rate him very highly. Yeah,
they do. There's been a couple of new contracts handed out recently. Sam Surridge, of course, who's doing really well at Oldham this season as well. Nnamdi Offo, rather than being out on loan, is learning his trade on the training ground here. Captains the under-21s, of course, as well, and has been doing well for them. So he's a big, you know, he's a big unit, Nnamdi. It's hard to sort of know who to compare him to, really, in terms of midfielders. He's not like Jefferson Lerma in terms of his sort of build, because Jefferson Lerma's a lot slighter, but Nnamdi is a bit of a tank. So I haven't seen too much of him, I've got to be honest. I've only picking up bits of what I've heard from the coaching staff, but certainly it will be benefiting him being on the training ground with these players every day. I'm not sure how close he is necessarily to we think about the FA Cup coming up, for example, in the new year, whether there would be an opportunity for him maybe on the bench in those sort of games we might see him. But I think he's a little way from the starting 11, even in cup games at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, next up for the Cherries is a trip to Molineux to face Wolverhampton Wanderers. Let's take a look at what happened last time out.
Good record here in Molineux. They've won 3 of their 4 meetings in all competitions, Bournemouth. Henry's delivery. Touched on and into the back of the net. Creeping in. She goes wide. Sigmund wants it and gets it, and it's a patient build-up play this from Bournemouth. Ritchie again. Is it B&M product? Yes, there is. It's gone straight through Ikeme and into the back of the net. Bournemouth back level through Arta. Delight for the travelling support. There to be hit, and their supporters. This is Francis again. It's a good start from Ikeme. That was hit with some real force. But they're holding on here, Wolves. Oh, and it's kept out again by Ikeme. It's brilliant goalkeeping, but finally put in by Ritchie. 5 minutes to go. Heartache for Wolves. Matt Ritchie may just have won this game for Bournemouth.
Well, goals from Harry Arter and Matt Ritchie there. Kris, it's been a good few years since that one, but what can we expect tomorrow?
Well, for a little reflection on that game, first of all, that was a game that lots of Cherries fans talk about because all sorts happened in that game, as you just saw. The Cherries really had to huff and puff in the second half to get that winner because they were playing against 10 for the last part of the game. Wolves obviously went down to 9 right at the end as well. Their fans were apoplectic by the end. They were trying to jump out of the upper tier and get at the referee. Their chairman ended up on the edge of the pitch confronting the referee at the end of the game as well. So they were not happy. It was a pretty tough environment that day to be in, I can tell you. But it was a really significant win in terms of propelling the Championship promotion campaign forward. So the one thing it does tell you is that Wolves fans get angry. So if Bournemouth can get them certainly works up away from home tomorrow, then that will be a good thing. I think they're much happier these days with the new setup with Nuno Espirito Santo, who has obviously done a great job there in getting them promoted. They dominated the Championship last year, got promoted with games to spare, or won the title with games to spare as well. And obviously he's been able to attract quality signings. A lot of the players they brought in, he knows well from Portugal. They've brought in players probably that a newly promoted team would have struggled to attract in any normal sort of environment. I think players coming to England sometimes would probably want to see a newly promoted team establish themselves, but they came into the Premier League this year with probably the most expectation on a newly promoted team that I can remember in recent years, for sure. People talking about them finishing in the top half, finishing, maybe even challenging for top 6, I was reading in some previews at the start of the season, which was probably a little bit far-fetched. But as the table stands at the moment, it's 8th against 10th tomorrow. I think Bournemouth can take a bit of heart from their recent little bad trot, because Wolves lost 5 out of 6 and it was a bit doom and gloom there all of a sudden after the sort of fairy tale bridesmaid start, if you like. But then, of course, they beat Chelsea in their last home game and then went to Newcastle and pinched a last-minute winner last weekend. So they were staring the bottom 3 in the face, and now they're back in the top half again, which is how quickly the league can turn around. So from that point of view, Bournemouth should take a bit of heart that Wolves have snapped out of it, so Bournemouth should be able to pretty soon.
And of course, 2 of those losses came against Cardiff and Huddersfield, so that's plenty to be encouraged by, isn't it?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you look at the games they lost actually in that run. Cardiff, as you say, Huddersfield, Brighton was in there as well. I want to say Watford might have been in there as well, but certainly teams in the sort of the mid to lower table. They weren't losing to big guns necessarily. I think they lost to Tottenham in there as well. They were the one big gun they lost to. But actually, as you say, they lost to some lower ranked teams, which is quite surprising given the way they'd started the season. Whereas you contextualise that with Bournemouth's run, and Bournemouth's 5 losses in 6 have come against, as we know, all the big guns. So there's no disgrace in that. So that was a surprising sort of run of form. But of course, if you go and beat teams like Chelsea, then you're immediately cancelling out losing to Cardiff. So from that point of view, they're obviously a very strong team at home. Chelsea have been a little bit, they were obviously a bit inconsistent that day. They went and beat Man City the next game, so they've had a funny 2 weeks for sure. But that is the Premier League. The teams from, the top 6 now are the top 6 in the table. Everton in 7th, Bournemouth in 8th. The chase is already on to finish top of the rest, and Bournemouth and Wolves are going to be right in that shake-up. And
as you say, they did beat Chelsea. They also backed it up with a win against Newcastle. How important was that for them?
Rafa Benitez wasn't happy about it for sure. He felt a bad decision had gone their way because Newcastle went down to 10 men in that game, but they do keep going right to the end. They've won in the last minute of games a couple of times this season. A bit of the old sort of Fergie time from yesteryear that Wolves have been pinching those late wins. So Matt Doherty, actually the scorer of that winning goal, was one of the 2 that got sent off against Bournemouth back in the last meeting up there. He's actually their second top scorer, I think, from right wing back with 3 goals. So one thing I will say is they are the lowest scorers in the top 13, Wolves, so they're pretty tight at the back, but I think they've only scored 17 goals in their 16 games so far. Quite a few 2-1s recently, which is a scoreline that Bournemouth know very well as well. So I'm not sure it's going to be a massively high-scoring contest tomorrow. We'll be looking back at this next week. It'll be 4-4, I'm sure. But from that point of view, 1 goal, maybe 2 goals for Bournemouth, you could see them get something out of it. As you mentioned earlier on, it's not often that Bournemouth don't score. So if they can go there and score tomorrow, I think they'll certainly have a very good chance of getting something.
And you mentioned that they brought in a lot of players, but who are the ones to look out for tomorrow?
Well, the one, Diego Jota, the Spanish player from ex-former Atletico Madrid player, he's one who's been a little bit in and out of the team the last couple of weeks. I think they've started to rotate a couple. They've got Raul Jimenez up front, who's on loan from Benfica and will cost them, I think, £30 million if they decide to take up the offer on him. Obviously, Ruben Neves in central midfield as well. They've brought in a lot. Moutinho will probably come back in as well. Adama Traore, the former Middlesbrough player, who's actually given Bournemouth 1 or 2 problems in the past, back in the Championship days. They've twiddled their formation a couple of times. They usually play 3 at the back, a sort of a 3-4-3, a bit like Bournemouth have done on occasion. So it'll be interesting to see whether Eddie matches up and goes 3, particularly looking to change things, and maybe we might see Tyrone Mings come back in away from home in a back 3. And certainly, you've got to keep an eye on Matt Doherty. He's one of the few sort of British or Irish players in their team. I haven't mentioned the goalkeeper yet either, the Euro 2016 winner Rui Patricio, who again was an eye-catching signing for them and someone you wouldn't have expected Wolves to be able to attract. So yeah, mainly continental talent, a lot of it. And that's why I think Wolves fans are just happy with what they're seeing at the moment. They've got that quality of players. They're 10th in the Premier League. Here we are nearly halfway through the season. So, yeah, I think the Wolves fans will be pretty positive at the moment.
And in terms of our team news, we've obviously had Eddie talk about Callum Wilson in quite a positive light. That's a massive boost, but there's no fresh concerns either, is there?
No, it's only the news about Dan Gosling, which is a bit of a negative. We knew he was going to be out for a week or 2, but it's going to be probably early January before we see him back. By which time, of course, Eddie might be thinking, or I'm sure he's already thinking, but maybe moving towards getting some reinforcements in maybe in that central midfield area. So yeah, in terms of team selection, as I threw in there, maybe with Wolves playing 3 at the back, and 3 being a formation that's worked reasonably well for Bournemouth away from home. Be interesting to see whether that is the way that they decide to go. Just reading some local newspaper reports from Wolves, it seems that teams that have flooded the midfield have had the best success against Wolves. So again, that might be another area that Eddie has looked at, I'm sure. So we might see Tyrone Mings in a back three possibly. I'm pretty sure we'll see Callum Wilson. I think if he was touch and go last week, I'm sure we'll see him back in. But apart from that, I think the team probably picks itself even off the back of a 4-0 defeat.
Absolutely. Well, next up for the Cherries following the game against Wolves is a trip to Stamford Bridge in the Carabao Cup. Let's take a look at what happened last year at the same stage in the competition.
So all very condensed in the middle third of the field right now. Batshuayi onto Kennedy, lovely touch. Fabregas is in here, the angle's tight, square for win! Chelsea breakthrough. Swift, slick, devastatingly effective. Hurled into the box. Morata's header was not a good one. This is Gosling! Bournemouth equaliser! They've deserved that, and surely that's the goal that will take it to extra time at the Bridge. Dan Gosling makes it Chelsea 1, Bournemouth 1. But it's a terrific finish from Dan Gosling, and just reward for Bournemouth's second half display. It's Hazard down the other end. He's got Morata inside. Alvaro Morata! Chelsea straight down the other end to surely go through to the semi-finals of the League Cup. What a blow for Bournemouth. The celebrations were going on at one end, and now they're going on all round three sides of Stamford Bridge.
Well, the Cherries are so close to extra time there. Kris, what will they have learnt from that?
Well, so tough at the end, wasn't it? I mean, I think my commentary went through the roof when Dan Gosling got that equaliser, and then literally it's one of the fastest sort of reply goals you've ever seen. They literally went straight at the other end and got that winner, which was so deflating on the night because Bournemouth deserved something from that game. There'll be people that say that the game's a free roll of the dice on Wednesday night, but I think when you get to a quarter-final, there's that element of pressure on it because just around the corner is uncharted territory, and a semi-final. Bournemouth have never been in the League Cup semi-finals. We've seen Chelsea have been. We talk about the defeat to Wolves, and then they turn up and beat Man City. So let's draw a line through the Man City win and pretend they've been inconsistent recently. We know they'll make a few changes as well, but they want to keep their momentum going in the league as well. Let's face it, it's not the draw that anybody wanted. When the teams were in the hat, there was a couple of certainly much more appealing looking options. Even Chelsea here would have been a lot more appealing. But to have a repeat of last year at exactly the same stage, I know a trip to London's not too far away. It's better than going to Middlesbrough away for a lot of the fans who are going to be travelling. But saying that, there is the free roll of the dice element that there are not Premier League points up for grabs. If Bournemouth get a result of Wolves this weekend, then it's a great chance to keep some momentum going, even in performance, if not in result, if they don't manage to come through it. But let's look on the positive side. If they can go through, it's a hugely exciting, two-legged semi-final. And all of a sudden, then, if you get a favourable draw, and someone's going to get a favourable draw in the semi-finals, all of a sudden, a cup final at Wembley is a very real possibility. So the team will certainly go there believing they can win. And I guess the only thing is, it's another great stage. It's another great stage for the team to go and famously win, and they have history of winning at Chelsea, not once but twice. So who says they can't again? And
as you said, it's worth mentioning that someone that gets through is going to get either Burton or Middlesbrough in the next round, and if you get that, it's looking a lot easier, isn't it?
I mean, with the greatest respect to those two teams that Bournemouth have come up against in recent seasons, I think they were the ones everybody wanted at home in the quarterfinals. Certainly, if you're a Premier League team, any lower league team at home, when you get to the last eight is an absolute bonus. So, yeah. As I said, I think at the time of the draw, I'd even have taken Middlesbrough away, to be honest with you. But it wasn't to be, but someone will get them in the semi-finals. But Bournemouth have got to get through one very big game before they get there. But I still think, and also, with Brighton to come on Saturday as well, they, at least in performance, they need to take something from Wednesday night if they don't manage to get through. But let's hope that the tables can be turned on last year.
And we've seen Eddie use his full squad in the Carabao Cup previously this season. Do you think it'll be the same on Wednesday?
Well, I mean, they can't change that many because there actually aren't too many options now when you look at the bench. But there certainly will be an opportunity for, you know, some of the guys who haven't had too many chances. The likes of Jordan Ibe. Obviously, Junior came into the team at the weekend. It made 3 games in a week. For someone that's a bit delicate like Junior might be a little bit too much. So while there is the rotation, there is also that problem of a very busy schedule coming up. So they'll probably Diego Rico, I'm sure we'll see him play. Central midfield. I mean, this is where you might get a game, honestly. I'm trying to think what could be changed in central midfield. There aren't that many options. And Eddie will want to put a team out. He won't just want to put in people just to fill gaps. He'll want to put a team out that can go and win the game. Because it is a cup quarter-final, because there are fans paying great money to go there and watch. And also for everything else, professional pride, for the ability to get through and be close to Wembley, all those things. So, yeah, he's got some decisions to make. I'm still waiting for Ryan Fraser to get his rest. I don't know when it will be. The poor man, he must be, I mean, he's obviously very fit. I just think he must be due a rest at some point. So maybe Wednesday might be the game that Ryan Fraser we see come off the bench. If Callum's got a bit of a hamstring, we might see him rested. It'll be a Lys Mousset or a Jermaine Defoe type game. And again at the back, you know, not overrun with sort of central defensive options. Tyrone Mings, I'm sure we'll see. But one of Steve Cook or Nathan Ake will probably have to play with Adam Smith out, of course. So yeah, I think Wednesday will be a bit of a headache actually in terms of the balance between people that need minutes, resting people that have got niggles, and putting a team out that can win the game.
And in terms of Chelsea, they obviously had a midweek game this week as well, so they'll be looking to utilise their full squad as well, won't they? Yeah,
but they've got millions of players. I think they've got more players out on loan than they've actually got in their actual squad. But yeah, we saw some useful youngsters in their squad last year. You think of the likes of Hudson Odoi, who I think came on in the Premier League game earlier on this season as well. Ampadu, they've got a lot of players who are on the fringes of their team, a bit like Nathan Ake was when he was there, who will be absolutely, chomping at the bit for an opportunity to prove themselves in a Chelsea shirt, prove they're worth a new contract, prove they're worth a place in the Premier League. So they will certainly make changes, but as we've said a few times, the big teams, when they change, you probably wouldn't even notice half the time. So Bournemouth will face a tough Chelsea team, albeit, as you say, I'm sure, with some changes as well.
And we spoke at the start of the season about a potential cup run, and now they're one game away from a semi-final. That would be quite something, wouldn't it? Yeah,
the League Cup's always been quite favourable in recent seasons. The FA Cup round the corner hasn't quite been as favourable, but of course with the draw having been made in the last week since we were last here, and Brighton at home again, who we'll be talking about in this on this programme on Friday. But yeah, from that point of view, a home game in the Cup, not too bad. Premier League team, not ideal. But from that point of view, I think there's, again, a lot worse draws they could have had. It's a shame for Brighton fans who obviously had to come here twice in quick succession last season in the League Cup and the League, who'll be doing the same again either side of Christmas. So not too far to come, only 100 miles. But yeah, a game that certainly is, you could see going both ways, but home advantage very important. But yeah, your question about the League Cup run is, it's been a good run till now with the help of some favourable draws. Unfortunately, the most unfavourable draw has come when the competition is just starting to hot up.
Well, a very busy week to come. That's all we've got time for today. Join us next week as we'll be previewing the game against Brighton and Hove Albion in the Premier League. Thanks for joining us.